Hello and welcome to MPB's award-winning At Issue, where we discuss and debate legislation, law, policy, and politics in Mississippi. I'm Wilson Stribling.
Good morning. It is great to be back at the Neshoba County Fair, Mississippi's giant house party, for 1 week every year. Republicans and Democrats, farmers, lawyers, teachers and business owners, longtime friends and first-time visitors, even a few folks from out of state. They all gather here under these trees to celebrate what I say makes Mississippi special.
That was Speaker of the House Jason White addressing the crowd at last week's Neshoba County Fair. The fair was plagued by heavy rain, and when the rain ceased, the heat and humidity were brutal. But that did not deter politicians, their supporters, and fairgoers one bit. With statewide elections coming up next year, speakers and attendees were clearly in campaign mode. Here's State Agriculture and Commerce Commissioner and former House member Andy Gibson, a Republican candidate for governor.
I'm the Andy Gibson who restored your Second Amendment constitutional right to keep and bear arms in Mississippi. I'm the Andy Gibson who restored your religious freedom, passed the strongest religious freedom laws against the Obama administration in Mississippi. I'm the Andy Gibson who stood with our law enforcement and fought crime, and I'm ready to do it again. Let's support our law enforcement. And I'm the Andy Gibson who was honored, and God made all this possible. He put me in office as chairman of Judiciary B, where, along with Dr. Jameson Taylor and my good friend Representative Becky Curry, we led the fight and passed a bill that overturned Roe versus Wade in America. We ended abortion, and I want to say this, no politician gets the glory for that. God alone does. That's why I brought my Bible with me today. Every good and every perfect gift comes down from God Almighty, the Father of lights, in whom there's no shadow of turning.
While other speakers focused on tech and heavy industry, Gibson spoke about the role of agriculture in Mississippi's economy.
Local food will actually double or triple the GDP of Mississippi's largest economic sector. How many of you know agriculture is the backbone of Mississippi's economy? It's the number one part of Mississippi's economy. And it doesn't matter how much economic development we have if we don't have anything to eat.
Gibson also spoke about juvenile crime and his vision for a new juvenile justice facility.
It does us no good to have a juvenile justice system that lets children run wild and run rampant and kill innocent people. And it's not that we don't have good laws. We have good laws. We need somewhere to put them. Take them out of those communities before they become a murderer. Put them in a juvenile center. Call it what you want to, a penitentiary or a detention or a rehabilitation center. But put them there, keep people safe, and make these young people earn their way out. And when we do that, we'll not only help the law-abiding citizens of Mississippi, we'll help the young people to get on a better track. I think it'll take a 300 or 400 bed facility. I don't care how much it costs. It'll be worth it for the public safety of the state of Mississippi.
State Attorney General Lynn Fitch, who is rumored to be another Republican gubernatorial possibility, championed the work her office has done and its alignment with the Trump administration.
You know, when the Trump administration wanted to see how to fight human trafficking, they came here to see how we do it, because Mississippi Attorney General's office is leading, because our stats speak for themselves, and I think these are so significant. We've done 64 multi-jurisdictional operations. We have trained 648 officers, 204 arrests, and more importantly, 391 victims have been recovered.
Her speech took an aspirational tone as she talked about the state's future.
I'm proud to have been a part of bringing Mississippi to this exciting moment in time. You know, we truly are on the verge of greatness right now. We're at that moment where we can transform Mississippi from one of the nation's best-kept secrets to the very top of the nation's leaderboard.
The state auditor and Republican gubernatorial candidate Shad White was absent, but sent greetings to fairgoers, explaining he is currently deployed with the National Guard in the Middle East. Billionaire businessman Tommy Duff, a rumored but as yet undeclared candidate for governor, attended the fair but did not speak, as did Republican candidate and former Speaker of the House Philip Gunn. And State Treasurer David McRae, who has been mentioned as a possible candidate for governor, announced he will instead seek a third term in his current office. That brings us to Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, long thought to be a 2027 candidate for governor. Hosemann is term limited after 8 years in his current office, and he has not made his plans known. But you would not be wrong if you thought he sounded a whole lot like a candidate last week at Neshoba.
We believe in limited government. We believe in personal responsibility and strong families. You see that in these cabins all around here. That's what drives the Neshoba County Fair. And you know what? Republican leadership has brought us back to those principles. My President Trump has brought us back to those principles, right? 13 years ago, the Democrats gave up to the Republicans control of Mississippi's government. For the last 7 years, I've been trying to fix some of the stuff they did.
Hosemann claimed credit for his role in cutting the income tax, funding education, and raising pay for teachers, among other accomplishments. He then talked about current priorities, including reducing the size of state government and looking at major changes for our state universities.
One thing we're going to have to address this year, and it's been coming for a while, our university system is extensive. Some of them are doing a great job. Some of them are not. And it's time for us to take a look at that. So the IHL did a study on how they are to allocate the money to the university system. And they decided $1 million out of $900 million ought to be shared by performance. 1% by performance for the universities. You know what I think? 99% ought to be on performance. That's exactly the way it is. We're educating the future of Mississippi, and we need to remember this is not 1956, this is 2026. And we can address the issues about our universities so that when they're run in 2056, they'll be run well and we'll have an educated workforce.
Like the other candidates, Hosemann described a Mississippi that has never been better, but must maintain its course.
We have changed the way the country looks at us. Even the New York Times is saying positive things about Mississippi. We have real results here. You are living in the state that cut taxes, funded education, and increased from 49th to 16th, fixed our retirement plan, built our bridges, paid off our debt. There's only one state like that, and you're living in it. It's Mississippi, and we need to recognize how good we are.
Governor Tate Reeves gave the fair's longest speech, following much the same theme as those running to replace him when his second term concludes.
Today, Mississippi is not just competing. Mississippi is winning. Since I've been governor, Mississippi has announced over $85 billion in new private sector investment. Together, we have announced the 6 largest economic development projects in state history. Earlier this year, I was proud to announce the largest economic development project in state history, a $20 billion investment by Elon Musk and XAI in DeSoto County. It will create hundreds of permanent high-paying jobs. It will create thousands of indirect jobs. It was a massive win for our state. Now, we all know a little bit about Elon. We know he's the first person in history to be worth $1 trillion. He knows a thing or two about business, and he knows a thing or two about getting things done. That's why it mattered when he said Mississippi is, quote, has insane execution speed.
Reeves also claimed that the transformation of rural health care is well underway.
During my administration, and thanks to our partnership with President Trump, Secretary Kennedy, and Administrator Oz, we have developed a plan and a budget to transform and strengthen health care in rural communities all across Mississippi.
But all this came with a dire warning.
There are radical activists who want to tear down the very fabric of America. They mock our faith. They attack the nuclear family. They teach our children that our country is evil, and they work to redefine basic truths. Well, I got news for them. That is not Mississippi, and that is not America. Mississippi still believes in faith, family, and personal responsibility. We still believe that boys are boys and that girls are girls. Mississippi still believes that police officers deserve our respect and that our veterans are heroes. And above all, we believe, in spite of our challenges, that America is still the greatest nation in the history of the world.
And there was plenty more packed into the 2 days of political speeches at Neshoba. Secretary of State Michael Watson, the only declared candidate for lieutenant governor, was a featured speaker. He, like all the Republican office holders and candidates, spoke in favor of legislative, judicial, and congressional redistricting. Governor Reeves said he may call a special session on redistricting before the 2027 legislative session begins in January. And while the 2027 elections stole most of the attention, the November 2026 election for U.S. Senate was not forgotten. Independent candidate Ty Pinkins described a government that no longer serves the people and how a small number of independent senators could bring change.
Right now, 6 independent veterans like myself are running for United States Senate across this country. If even 3 of us win, we could deny either party an outright Senate majority. What if America woke up the day after election to the headline, Mississippi sent an independent veteran to the United States Senate to hold both parties accountable? At some point, some state is going to do it. Why not Mississippi? Why not us?
And here's the Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate, Scott Colomb.
So let me tell you exactly who I am. I'm running for the United States Senate, and yes, I'm running as a Democrat. But I'll tell you the same thing I've told Democrats and Republicans and everyone in between. I'm not running to be another Democratic senator. I'm running to be Mississippi's senator.
As he emphasized that he would put his state before his party, Colomb criticized incumbent Republican Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith for doing the opposite.
And unlike her, I would have voted to drag the Epstein files into the light from day one.
Senator Hyde-Smith did not attend the fair. Now let's hear viewpoints from both sides of the aisle. We welcome Rebekah Staples and Brandon Jones to our At Issue Roundtable. Rebekah is a Republican and the founder and president of Free State Strategies. Brandon is an attorney and a former Democratic member of the Mississippi House. Rebekah, Brandon, welcome, as always. Before we revisit last week's Neshoba County Fair, we should mention there are some important matters regarding Mississippi's youth court system. What can you tell us about those, Brandon?
Sure. 2 issues. One, probably most immediate. Last Friday, the Mississippi Office of the State Public Defender filed a lawsuit against the Administrative Office of Courts. And what this lawsuit is about is those records that the youth court uses and their accessibility to both parties and families and attorneys. There's been a long debate about whether or not our youth court system needs to have some sunshine, needs to be more transparent in its practices. And so this goes to the heart of that question and really has to do with who has access to those records. The other piece of it is that our youth courts in this state are known for issuing pretty broad gag orders, in some cases threatening members of the family and attorneys if they speak about the case at all. So the effort here, as I understand it from the state public defender, is to get this issue settled as to whether youth courts may withhold information and close that system off in the manner that they have. So we're a long way off from resolution on that, but that's the issue there. The legislative issue is a little bit more nuanced. There were a variety of things that we've talked about, including this records issue that I just mentioned during the course of the legislature. There didn't seem to be an argument about whether or not the youth court system should persist and continue to exist, but there was a repealer on a couple of really important statutes that are crucial to data collection at the youth court. And this was fixed in a bill sent over by the Senate, but the House adjourned before they took it up. And so there are some key provisions that have to do with youth court functionality that will sunset at the end of this month, subject to this repealer. So I suspect those will be dealt with at some point soon. It doesn't mean the system stops. It doesn't mean we won't have youth court in Mississippi, but there are some pretty important issues and statutes that'll have to be renewed when the legislature comes back, when it comes back.
I'm sure these are two issues we'll be looking at more on a future program. We may also be discussing the U.S. Supreme Court decision, which came down just this morning, upholding Mississippi's mail-in ballot laws, allowing ballots to be postmarked by Election Day and received and counted later. We'll talk more about that on a future program as well. For now, let's go back to Neshoba. Candidates, would-be candidates, possible candidates, rumored candidates. Rebekah, what are your takeaways from this year's fair?
Well, my takeaway is in your question. There are all types of candidates on the horizon for 2027. And I think what I would say is already we're seeing where the top contenders for the governor's race, and I'll remind our listeners, Governor Tate Reeves is term limited, so he cannot seek office. So we'll have an empty governor's seat. This is attracting, I've heard, anywhere from 8 to 10 different names for governor. And I think with these speeches, you're already seeing these candidates or would-be candidates trying to differentiate themselves, claim victory over what they have strengths in, and then outline a vision for the future. I think the challenge for Republicans in this next election for governor is going to be, in a field that crowded, how do you gain enough votes to make it to a runoff? So I thought Neshoba was a good preview, even though the field is not yet set.
Brandon, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I didn't think about Neshoba County Fair much this year. And I was going to ask, I mean, in a serious way, you know, the extent to which this event is sort of fading in terms of its political importance. I said that to some people who are supporters of the fair, Rebekah, and they took my head off. They were like, well, now, hang on a minute. This is, you know, I can feel Scott Bounds making his way to the broadcast booth right now. But the truth is that, you know, look, the numbers were down a little bit this year. These can be sort of overlooked affairs increasingly over the past few cycles. And what I was told by a defender of the fair is that what you get out of this is earned media, because it is covered by the media, which is certainly true. You do get articles out of it. So it's not just about who's standing there.
And from a media standpoint, that's largely because you get everybody in one place at the same time. It makes it easier to cover, and you got everybody there. You can ask them all questions for the most part and compare and contrast their views. There are not many other venues like that.
That's exactly right. That's 100% true, and I think that's kind of where its value lies. I will say, Rebekah, as a Democrat, we don't think of Neshoba County as like home turf. Nobody's like, well, let's go, you know, grab all those Democratic votes at the Neshoba County Fair. It's just, you're on enemy territory. It feels that way. You've got, you know, the Republican candidates and the way they talk. It feels like a home audience. It has kind of like a, you know, intramural kind of feel to it. So whenever Scott Colomb, who I'm sure we're talking about in a minute, I'm sure he felt a little bit like the away team walking into the Neshoba County Fair this week.
Yeah, no question, Brandon. I will say I had a visceral reaction when you said, the fair's fading. But then I thought, I'm a Republican. It has different importance for our party than the Democrats historically. I do want to remind you, though, that this is the first year that it was held in June. So there is a date change. And I don't have to tell you, we had monsoon rain. And so that's not unusual at Neshoba, but from defenders of the fair, longtime fairgoers, they said it was the worst rain they've ever seen. So I'm a defender of the fair, but I hear you, Brandon.
We should probably say, I mean, because I happen to come from the Gulf Coast. For those of us unfamiliar, the fair is not unlike what we see in our county fairs in the sense that you have, different competitions, vegetables, fruit, animals, all variety of things, animal shows. What makes this unique is people actually live on the premises while the fair is taking place, and it's just become this historic location for speeches, including not least of which Ronald Reagan launching his presidential campaign and countless others. So anyway, just for those who might not be familiar.
Let's talk about some of the individual candidates. We know that several have, in the race for mayor, several have declared their intentions to run. What's Delbert Hosemann going to do? Rebekah, do you have any predictions regarding the current lieutenant governor?
I think I always say if I knew what any of these candidates or might be candidates were going to do, I'd be in Vegas. But here's what I will say. I actually get this question a lot. What will Lieutenant Governor Hosemann run for governor? If we're going to have a crowded field for the governor's race, then your calculus is not how do I win outright, but how do I get to a runoff? And those numbers, a threshold for a runoff, it gets smaller the more candidates you have. So, if I'm Governor Hosemann, I'm looking at this from a number standpoint, evaluating whether or not I have the voter base to make it to a runoff. So we'll see.
And I believe I said a moment ago in the race for mayor. Of course, I meant race for governor. Lots of races running through my head right now. Brandon, what do you think Delbert Hosemann's going to do?
Well, he announced he was running for governor. Did we all just forget that? Like he said he was going to run for governor, and now he hasn't mentioned that in a while. But he had said, to his supporters at a private event that was reported on that he was running. I guess he's reconsidering that now. Look, he opened his remarks with the phrase, "My President Trump." I clocked that. Why do you say such a thing, Rebekah, if you're not running for office? I mean, I hope he doesn't just go around saying that. That sounds to me like a guy that wants people to like him. So I think he's running. Let me put it this way. He wants to run. He wants to run. Mm-hmm. Now, will he ultimately conclude that he can't win? Possibly. But I think he wants to do it, is my take on that.
What about the race for lieutenant governor? Michael Watson has announced his intentions. Who's going to run against him, Rebekah?
Well, I think at this point, I'd say no one smart will run on the Republican ticket against Michael Watson, two-term Secretary of State. He's got a long track record, solid conservative credentials from his time in the state Senate. And so he's coming in strong. He is an announced candidate for lieutenant governor. I've seen and heard him at various events already outlining his platform if he is elected lieutenant governor. I have not really heard a lot of other names that I think are serious contenders right now. So he might be positioned to have an easy win. We'll see.
Who will the Democrats put up against him, Brandon, if he's the nominee?
I don't know. One of the reasons that Republicans, I think, have to get out early is because there are so many of them that are angling for these top jobs. So it makes their campaign a lot longer. Campaigns are as expensive from the time that you start them until the election actually occurs. And so there are people who are contemplating these things, keeping their powder dry. But I understand if you're already in elected office, statewide office, you sort of have to stake out your position. That's part of why you see Republicans announcing so soon. We haven't even voted in 2026 yet. We're way out from. We're even longer than a year from the next primary. So there's a lot of time for this stuff to take shape. But yeah, I think we'll know more after November. But for now, I don't think a Democrat is going to announce for that job. And it could come from the Senate. I would not be surprised if it was not somebody who potentially served with Secretary of State Watson.
What about Democratic candidates for governor? Do you think the Democrats are going to coalesce behind one person and wait and announce that person and put all their force behind that one person?
You don't want to give Democrats too much credit for being much of an organized political operation, because that's not really that the reputation. But I will point out that in recent years, there's been exactly what you described. There's been not very tense fights for these jobs at the top. There's been some coalescence. There's been some agreement. So yeah, I would expect that again, but I still think we're waiting to see. I certainly would mention Brandon Presley, who was within 3 points of winning this seat 3 years ago. He would have to be looking at it. And yeah, but I think a lot of that is yet to come into focus.
What about the race for the U.S. Senate? Cindy Hyde-Smith's seat, of course, she's running for re-election. Is there, Rebekah, is there any reason for her to be concerned about her seat?
Well, I think she's not concerned, and I think the numbers support that position. Senator Hyde-Smith was not at Neshoba County Fair. Typically, candidates do speak. However, I think that's an indication that she's looked at the numbers and the polling. We're a heavy Republican state. I'm not concerned about her election. I think she will easily sell to re-election in the U.S. Senate.
Brandon, you agree with that?
No, I mean, the polling is close, but really the polling doesn't tell the whole story because in the last 3 close elections, you've seen races within 6 points. Mike Espy was within 6 points of Cindy Hyde-Smith. Jim Hood was within 6 points of Tate Reeves. And as we mentioned a moment ago, Brandon Presley was within 3 points 3 years ago. So we're seeing increasingly close 5-point races. That makes Mississippi feature some of the closest races, Republican versus Democrat, in the country over the course of the last decade. So there's no reason to believe that's going to stop, namely because Senator Hyde-Smith has some of the toughest reelect numbers and just, favorability numbers of any returning member of the Senate on the ballot this year. Where I do agree with Rebekah, though, look, it doesn't serve her to campaign hard. There is a sense in which she's not an excellent campaigner. I don't even think Republicans would argue that. This is not a place where she thrives, is on the campaign trail. She's always played it kind of close to the vest. She's always been careful with her public appearances. She doesn't do town halls. She's very careful with how she handles that. I would not expect her to do this race differently. But in fairness to everybody involved, the Senate, Congress were in session, so there is a reason they weren't there. I don't know that it was purely a political calculation. My understanding is they were doing work. I'll take her at her word on that. But yeah, I think the race will be closer. I really do.
Rebekah, final word on the Senate race before we move on?
I think Brandon said Mississippi is competitive in the U.S. Senate, and I'd just say he's wrong. We're a Republican state. We're going to stay that way.
Let's talk about what Governor Reeves said at Neshoba. He invoked not only President Trump, which he's known to do a number of times, but also mentioned Elon Musk, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Dr. Oz. Rebekah, are those names that play well in Mississippi?
Well, it depends. I think if your name is Elon Musk and you're a South Haven resident, you might have mixed opinions on Elon Musk. There's a project of some controversy up there. Yeah. But on the whole, I think Mississippians support the Trump agenda, support Dr. Oz, the MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, with Robert Kennedy. So I think in large part, Mississippians do support this. I will be realistic, though. I think as we are approaching 2027, folks are looking at their pocketbooks, and with the continuation of the conflict in Iran, that is having the downstream impact of raising cost. So I think very strong support for the Trump administration right now. Of course, with all things political, that could change.
Brandon, your thoughts on the governor's speech?
Well, he's angry, and he's just angrier and angrier the more you hear him talk, and I don't know why that is. I mean, he's won every political office he's ever run for. He's been in elected office for most of his adult life. He's worked for the state of Mississippi longer than he's worked for any other employer, and it's not even close. And yet he's railing against government, which is just odd to me because he's run the government for most of my adult life. So I'm confused as to where all this residual anger comes from because he has had so much to do with the way Mississippi finds itself today. I I presume, though, that has something to do with him rehearsing for a party of one. His term as governor is coming to a close. I don't think it's any secret that he wants to work in the Trump administration. What better way to do that than to invoke the names of members of the current administration? So I think it's pretty transparent to me that Governor Reeves would like to work in D.C. These names and their popularity, to me, it just shows there's no difference when we talk about the MAGA movement. That is the Republican Party. There's not the MAGA movement and the Republican Party. There's only the MAGA movement. It's only these people. So these people that were mentioned, those are luminaries within the current Republican MAGA Party. And I think he's probably right to say, these are our people. And again, he's at Neshoba County Fair looking out at a lot of people who probably are MAGA people feeling that same way. So, I think he knew his audience.
Brandon, Rebekah, thank you as always. This has been At Issue, a weekly in-depth look at legislation, law, policy, and politics in Mississippi. You can hear At Issue every Monday evening at 5 o'clock on MPB Think Radio. You can also subscribe to our At Issue podcast, and you can catch the video version, which includes our full interviews and roundtable discussions, by going to mpbonline.org/issue. If you and your family benefit from programs like ours, we encourage you to consider a donation to MPB. Just go to mpbonline.org and click on the Donate link. At Issue is a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting. I'm Wilson Stribling. From all of us here at MPB, thank you for listening.